is Keeper. I am the author of the soon-to-be-released book, Helplessness. What brothers go through once we learn our sisters have been molested by our parents. Yes, it happens. It happens a lot more than you may think. I am also the creator of the podcast, This is for the Brothers. What I'm getting ready to share right now is episode number 4. It's called Keeper Story, The Babysitter and the First Two. What you're about to hear is what I recorded in 2017, 4 years ago, on January 30th. I was 4 years into writing my book, Helplessness, when I realized back in 1966, what our babysitter had been doing to me and my older brother was sexual abuse, child sexual abuse. In 1966, our babysitter had taken advantage of me and my older brother for about 6 months on almost a daily basis. I didn't learn of my sister's molestations until 1977. However, in 1971 is when my stepfather started to molest my sisters. 3 of my sisters at that time were ages 5 and 6. In 1966, I was just a year older than they were when they were first molested. I was age 7. I didn't know what she was doing to me until January of 2017, when I decided to take a step back and I asked myself, wait a minute, was she sexually molesting us? Because keep in mind, I'm in the middle of writing about my sisters, and it never occurred to me what she was doing to us was the same thing. And I'm sure that may happen to a lot of brothers, a lot of men, because oftentimes we hear hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of stories about women who've been sexually abused, raped, or molested. So we don't automatically go to that spot when something happens to us. What you're about to hear is what I recorded in 2017. It is the story, it is my story, when our babysitter Ann molested me and my older brother for 6 months.
The Ann story. Today's date, January 30th, 2017. Where to begin with this? I don't know. I had completely forgotten all about this chapter. Why, I don't know. This chapter in my life, why I don't know. Maybe it's just because I never recognized what it was. I never understood what it was until about 10 days ago. I had been looking online at different stories of women who have experienced being sexually molested, and just getting a sense of what their emotions were during the time of the molestation, and 20, 30 years, 40 years later, what is it like for them? And in doing so, it occurred to me, I wonder if very many men share their story or reach out for help trying to understand what really happened to them and how do they reconcile them being molested. Because typically what we get are stories from women from all walks of life. It really spans the entire generation of women, from age to religion, to country, to family makeup, women being molested by men, their fathers, their uncles, their grandfathers, close friends of the family, brothers, and in some cases, women being molested by their mothers, being molested by their sisters. However, in looking at the topic of being molested, there are very few stories of men talking about their experience. And certainly, I have yet to run across an experience of a man sharing a story of how he felt once he realized or found out that his sisters were molested. It's hard enough getting a man to talk about what it's like for them to carry the weight of knowing that they were molested. It's rarely something that men talk about. It's more of an issue that women talk about, and certainly due to what is happening in our politics right now here in the United States, it has really brought a sharp focus to women's rights. And I think the same type of focus needs to be brought to men as it relates to men and little boys being sexually molested. There's such a social construct that says men do not cry, men do not talk about these things, men don't share hugs, men don't embrace each other, men don't do these things, fathers don't hug their sons, fathers don't kiss their sons. There are just so many things that are set up to create barriers for emotional connection with men, and this is not a sexual thing. This is just an emotion of transferring energy from one to the other with the understanding that I understand, I appreciate, I have gratitude for what you have done, what you have achieved. The social construct here in the United States, I think even more so in other countries, is such that if you do that, you are considered less than a man, when in fact it is the complete opposite. As I said earlier, I didn't realize what had happened to me when I was in the 3rd grade and my older brother was in the 4th grade, the two of us together. I didn't realize what had happened for months was being sexually abused. This is long before finding out what happened with my sisters. How do you talk about this? I don't know. I guess you just start from the beginning. So here goes. In 1967, we had moved from Gardena, California to Los Angeles. We moved to a place off of Crenshaw and Slauson. And the place that we moved into was used as a dental building. It was a 1-story green dental building. I guess it was the only place that my mother could find at the time. My aunt, who helped drive us down from Portland as we were escaping my dad, had gone back up to Portland to be with her family. She stayed with us for a while when we were in Gardena, and this aunt was someone that as a little kid you had a lot of fun with. She was always energetic, loud, always had an opinion, but as a kid, especially as a little boy, she was the aunt that would do all the backflips. She was the aunt that would flip you over. She was the aunt that would wrestle with you. And so we always just looked at this aunt as someone who was just fun and was willing to just spend time with you whenever she could. But as I said, in 1967, she had gone back to Portland to be with her family and raise her kids. The corner of Crenshaw and Slauson, what I remember about it, before I go into detail about the house, what I remember about it was we were actually on Slauson, and across the street was a shopping center. And that shopping center always had a lot of activity. For some reason, I always wanted to go across the street to that shopping center, but being 3rd grade, in the 3rd grade, my mother wouldn't let that happen. We were just a block away from Crenshaw, so it was just a matter of just walking up to the corner and going across the street. But that never happened. I did manage to sneak over there once when my mom had gone to work. And our babysitter at the time said that we could go outside in the front and play. The front where we played was actually a dental office parking lot. It actually had the stripes for the cars to park in, and where people would get out and come into the dental office. So as a kid, Going into this dental office that was green, more like a teal green, it had a lot of rooms. Just like any dental office. I remember there were maybe 8 to 10 rooms. There were almost, and that wasn't including the kitchen area. Keep in mind, they converted this into a house. It kept most of the rooms, it converted them into bedrooms. They weren't large at all. They were maybe 10 by 10, 10 by 12. Just enough room for the dental practitioner to come in and do their work and then go to the next room. The doors weren't the type of doors that had door handles. They were the sliding doors. You slid them open, you slid them closed, just like you do in a typical dentist's office. So you really couldn't lock the door. You just slid them closed and you slid them open. There wasn't much space for us to play because in a dental office, there's just not a large space. One room was dedicated to be the living room. One they had converted into the kitchen. And this is the first kitchen. It's this kitchen that I learned the difference between eating beets and eating ocean sprayed cranberry sauce, which I absolutely love. This particular year, Thanksgiving, my mom had opened up a can of cranberry sauce, or so I thought, and put it on the counter. And I decided to go in the kitchen because the food was smelling good. And I wanted to have some cranberry sauce. I took out a tablespoon and dipped my tablespoon into the cranberry sauce and just shoved it in my mouth. It was one of the worst tastes I have ever had. And it wasn't until I spit it out that our babysitter, Ann, told me that was not cranberry sauce. That was in fact beets. It was horrible. From this day on, I will not eat any beets. So as I said, there wasn't a lot of place to play outside. Luckily for us, we were on the corner, and at the opposite end of the corner on Slauson was an abandoned gas station. And we could go out there and play in that abandoned gas station. My brother and I were the ones who typically went outside because we were the oldest. I was 8, he was 9. Everyone else pretty much just stayed inside because they weren't really old enough to go out and play on their own. One thing I do remember about the gas station, I love the fact that the filling station part where you get the gas was covered. And I always imagined putting a basketball goal and rim on there and just thinking that's the perfect place for a kid to play basketball. It was the perfect height. You could go out there and play, but of course I never owned a basketball. So that pretty much defeated that purpose. We stayed there for, I guess, about a year. My mom was looking for a job and she eventually found one. I don't know the circumstances that got us in there. I know I loved the Gardena house. It was a lot of fun, just a lot of room to run around. We lived in a cul-de-sac, but this was very different. And moving there, as I said, my mom had to get a job. And in order for that to happen, she had to hire a babysitter. And the babysitter, her name was Ann. Ann was a black woman. I don't remember how tall she was. I don't remember her being particularly tall, but she wasn't short either. But I do remember her being large. And she was given the job of watching us while my mom went to work. And in fact, she stayed with us. She lived with us Monday through Friday. She went home on the weekends. That was the setup. My mom would get back so late, I guess, that she would just be too tired. So Ann would be the one who would make breakfast. She'd get us off to school, make sure we got off on time if my mom was running behind. She'd make lunch. She'd make dinner for those kids that were at the house. I was going to 37th Street, Angeles Mesa Elementary School in the 3rd grade. My older brother was going there in the 4th grade. My young sister directly under me was in the 2nd grade. And another brother was in 1st grade and so on and so forth. Angeles Mesa Elementary School. It was a lot of fun at Angeles Mesa. We could, you got a chance to meet a lot of people, but when we came home, things got to be a little different shortly after Ann started taking care of us. For a while, she was really nice and she was very kind. You never saw her being dominant or being mean or being upset. She was really understanding for a while. And I guess that while was maybe 3 or 4 weeks. But after about 3 or 4 weeks, she started to really take control of the house. Certainly when it came to us kids, she was allowed to discipline us. She was allowed to do whatever she wanted to do, as long as she was taking care of the kids. And for my mom, that was probably good. Every now and then, my older brother and I would go down to Van Ness Playground and play basketball more often than I did, because it was about 5 or 6 blocks away. But the times that I did go down, I got to go down with him. And other than watching him play basketball in Portland, that was where I really started to understand what basketball was all about, going there. And there were so many kids. There were kids playing baseball, kids playing basketball. You could see kids out in this large grass area playing football, flag football or touch football. So I really enjoyed being able to go down to Van Ness Park. But Ann, as I said, after a while, Ann started to become more dominant, started to exert more influence, the things that she wanted us to do. Certainly when we got back from school, it started to become where instead of she was the one cleaning the house and cooking, which she was paid to do, she started making us do it while she just went into her bedroom and just lied in the bed and watched TV. We ended up doing cooking. We ended up doing all the cleaning, and she just kicked back. She was just, it started to become really, really lazy. But we didn't know any better. We figured that was just the way it is, or the way that it was supposed to be. Turns out, Ann was pretty twisted. She was pretty twisted. Once she started to take over the house and she would go into her room and just lie down, if someone got in trouble, then she would come out and start handing out punishments. That's where I learned the thing of standing in the corner for 30 minutes with your hands behind your back, or an hour. Go stand in the corner for 30 minutes to an hour with your hands behind your back and do not turn your head. Can you imagine that? Having someone 8 years old, 9 years old, stand in a corner for an hour, and if you did, another hour was tacked on, or another 30 minutes was tacked on. If you had to go to the bathroom, your punishment time started over. She thought it was funny. It wasn't very funny at all. And certainly for my brothers and sisters, if someone got in trouble, it was funny at that time, but once they saw they had to stand in the corner, it stopped being so funny. In fact, my brothers and sisters after a while would say, just let him out of the corner. He's been there long enough. And for Ann, it was not long enough. I think the longest time that I stood in the corner was an hour. And for some reason, I happened to stand in the corner a lot, I guess. For her, I was always in trouble. I was always doing something wrong. But that's not the twisted part. The twisted part for me happened when one day she was in her room and she called my older brother into the bedroom and had us close the door. Now her bedroom happened to have a bathroom, a toilet, and a sink attached to it. And this time that she did this, the first time that she did this, I didn't know what was going on. I was 8 years old. My older brother was 9. She called us into the bedroom while she lied on the bed. And she had me stand on one side of the bed and my older brother stand on the other side of the bed. And she said she wanted us to give her an alcohol bath. I was told to go into the bathroom and get a bottle of alcohol and the bag of cotton swabs. And so I went into the bathroom to get the cotton swabs. My older brother, when I came back, was just standing there. We were just looking like we didn't know what we were supposed to do. What's an alcohol bath? What's an alcohol rub? No idea what that was. What she then would do, and the first time we did it, I didn't know. I had no idea. She had a robe on, and she got into bed underneath the blanket, and she opened up her robe, and she was completely naked. The blankets went up just above her waist, so you couldn't see below her waist. You couldn't see her crotch at all. So she told us to grab the alcohol and put them on cotton swabs and give her an alcohol rub on her chest, all over. We were to do this until she said stop, and it went on for quite a while. When we would do this, her breathing would start to pick up. She would close her eyes, and she would just start to breathe heavy. Now, back then, that was my first time seeing boobs. They were the biggest things I had ever seen. And I didn't know why the center of them were black. I had no idea what that was. And they had these little things sticking up. I didn't know, had no idea. But we were to be sure to do a really good job on her boobs. As she would do this, the first time, she would slip her hand underneath the sheet and start rubbing. Now that I know what it is, she would start rubbing between her legs as me and my brother stood there doing this. And now that I know what she was doing, she was masturbating with me and my brother there, giving her this alcohol rub, or she wanted us to give her her breast a massage. And we would be there for, I guess, 20 minutes until she was ready for us to be done. And when we were done, or I guess more to the point, when she was done, we were to throw the cotton swabs away, put everything back, and not tell my mom about it. After the first time, it would be 2 or 3 days later, she'd call us back in there again. 2, 3 days after that, she'd call us back in there again. My other brothers and sisters were either taking a nap. Most of the time they were watching TV, watching cartoons. This would happen after we got home from school, so they would start watching cartoons. But my older brother and I, that's what we would do while she masturbated to me and my older brother being there, massaging her boobs. It went on for months. It went on for months. Anne was with us, I guess, for about 6 months. And from maybe the first month on, that was the program for her. She got an opportunity to get a job, but the bigger benefit to her were these 2 little boys who would satisfy her sexually, would take advantage of 2 little boys who had no idea what was going on. She would do this in what started 3 days, 4 days. It started to become an everyday ritual. After about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, I told my mom about it. And my mom, all she said to me was, "That's all we have right now. I can't do anything else." It wasn't until, as I said, a few weeks ago that I realized, after looking it up, I just got curious, what constitutes sexually molesting a child. And it turns out having a child in front of you while you are pleasuring yourself in their presence is child molestation. But for Anne, it wasn't just that. It was, from time to time, what she would do when one of my younger brothers and I got in trouble. 2 or 3 times she would have us, when we got in trouble, our punishment was to stand in the middle of the living room while everyone else sat there. And we were to put our arms around each other and kiss each other for 30 minutes. That was our punishment. While she just laughed, she thought it was so funny. To this day, I could smell my brother's breath to this day. It is intense. It's just intense. And to imagine forcing a 3rd grader and a 1st grader to stand in the middle of the room and kiss each other for 30 minutes as a punishment while she just laughed is pretty horrific. My other brothers and sisters, they just sat there. They didn't know what to think of it. They didn't know what to do. After I told my mom about it, and she said that it's all she can do right now, I figured, okay, I guess that's the way things are. This is what we're supposed to do. When she calls us in the room, so she can have her sexual pleasure with me and my brother, that's the way it's supposed to be. But a curious thing happened a few weeks after I told her. Anne decided that she was going to take me to see the Aretha Franklin concert at the Long Beach Convention Center. And I thought it was great. Aretha Franklin was amazing. And after we left the concert, we went over to the Long Beach Pier and amusement park, and I could get whatever I wanted to get, no questions asked. We stayed there so late that the park closed with Ann and I at the top of the Ferris wheel when everyone else was gone. It was just 1 or 2 employees left. The whole place was getting dark, and we were screaming that we were at the top of the Ferris wheel. Luckily for us, someone heard us, and they came back, and they turned the lights on and brought us down. Shortly before my concert, she had taken my older brother to see James Brown. Just because she was being nice. But I don't think that was being nice. I think she was trying to apologize to my mother for molesting her sons. I think she was trying to possibly make nice with me and my brother so we wouldn't tell anyone else. But the damage was done. We were already victims in the 3rd grade and in the 4th grade. Already victims. So right after we got down from the Ferris wheel, it was obviously time to leave because the park had closed, all the lights were off, all the music had stopped. So right outside the amusement park entrance was a phone booth. So Ann and I walked over to the phone booth and called 2 people. She called a taxi, which arrived shortly after the call, and she called my mom to tell her that since it was very late, she could take me to her place. She stayed a few blocks away and would walk to our house the days that she would come to visit. So obviously she stayed pretty close to where we lived. And I guess it was okay with my mom because we ended up taking the taxi to Ann's house. She lived in a duplex, and she stayed in the upper part of the duplex, the upper floor. And I remember walking in, it was very dark. There was a lot of wood paneling and wood, dark wood, all throughout the duplex. And we walked toward the back. It was a narrow hallway that we had to walk through to get to her bedroom. And when we got to her bedroom, immediately the order came out. Get the cotton balls, get the alcohol. And so I went into her bathroom and did just that. But this time when I came out, she was on her bed already, but she was fully exposed. She was fully nude. I saw everything. And there was no pretense about what was going to happen. There was no pretense on her part about what she was expecting me to do. So I started the alcohol rub, and she immediately started to masturbate, spread her legs. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's what that looks like down there. And she just masturbated while I massaged her. It was most unsettling. Once we were done, she said it was time for bed, and she had me lie on the bed next to her. And I suppose, luckily for me, she put the sheet over me. But the one thing that she did do after was, without getting dressed, fully nude, she just wrapped her body around mine. And, you could just hear the breathing. So I'm just imagining that she was doing whatever it was she was doing. Wow. The next morning, we got up and she just walked me back home as if there was nothing to it. I don't remember my mom asking me a thing about it. Yeah. Obviously I didn't tell my mom what happened because I'd already told her before, and she sanctioned what Ann was doing. She said it was okay. When she said that's all I could do right now, what was the point of telling her? She already knew what was going on. So there was no need to tell her about what happened at Ann's duplex. If you're a little kid, a boy or a girl, and the people that you trust to protect you are the ones raping or molesting you or empowering the action willingly, knowingly, never stepping in to protect you, what do? This happened 5 years before my sisters. So as I think about this, I look at permission was not only given, but at the time, the person who my mom was dating when we lived on the house, in the house on Slauson, the dental building, was Henry. And I look at it as though, okay, he witnessed that take place. He witnessed my mother allowing the babysitter to molest her sons. And he had to be thinking, okay, if she let that happen for her 2 sons, there's nothing she's going to do if I go after her daughters. Because what can she do? She knows I know. I was dating her at the time. So I think in this weird, macabre sort of way, he realized that my sisters were fair game, and there was nothing she could, whether my sisters would do, they would receive no protections. So as a little boy, 8 years old, going through this, and then to learn of my sisters 11 years later, wow. All the time that I've been carrying the weight of not being able to be there for my sisters, when I found out that my two oldest sisters, the two oldest girls, were molested, I couldn't be there for them. To know that I was molested long before my sisters were molested, because like my sisters, I was never asked, "Are you okay?" My older brother was never asked, "Are you okay?" We were left there by ourselves to try to figure it out. It's a different mindset now for me, because it kind of brings my sister's story full circle, because when I started with my sisters, it was me, a victim, not a direct victim, a victim as the family experienced the learning of what happened. But now, knowing that I was a direct victim puts a different spin on this whole thing. As I look back on it, I have a better understanding of what my sisters went through. You don't tell anyone, be quiet, the intimidation, all of it. All of it. There has to be a way. There must be a discussion, a broad national debate about this. You know, we speak these days. There just has to be something. Anyway, that's that.